We like to think AI is like super smart,
Right.
especially at math.
Hmm.
Like we see those headlines, AI beating chess masters and like crushing standardized tests. But what if even the like most advanced AI, what if it's not really reasoning?
Yeah.
What if it's just like really good at pattern recognition?
Yeah. It's interesting, right?
That's what we're diving deep into today, looking at this research paper. It's from Apple,
Okay.
and it sparked a really interesting discussion on Reddit. So we're gonna look at both of those.
Sounds good. Yeah. It's a real head scratcher, this paper. It really challenges some assumptions that we have about AI. Like just because it can solve, complex math, does it actually get it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, does it really understand?
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit. So we're talking about large language models, LLMs.
Right.
These AI systems can generate texts, translate languages, they can even write different kinds of creative content.
Yeah.
But they've been in the news a lot for their like mathematical abilities.
Exactly. There's this benchmark. It's called GSM-AK, and it's like the benchmark. It's the gold standard for figuring out how good is this LLM at math.
Okay.
And it's basically a bunch of grade school math problems, thousands of them. And LLMs have been doing really well on it.
See, everyone thinks, oh, they're little mathematicians.
Yeah, pretty much. But these Apple researchers, they're like, okay, but let's dig a little deeper. So they created this new benchmark called GSM-Symbolic,
Okay.
which is based on GSM-AK, but it has a twist.
Okay.
So instead of just giving the LLM one version of the problem, they're like, we're going to give it to you 100 different ways. So they would change the names of the people. They would swap out the objects. They'd like just tweak the wording a little bit.
Okay.
But the actual math is the same.
So it's like giving them the same math test,
Exactly.
but just worded differently each time.
Exactly. To try to control for if the LLM is like memorizing answers or if it's picking up on like just the way the questions are phrased.
Superficial patterns.
Correct.
Oh, interesting. So what happened when they did that?
So they still did, well, LLMs on this GSM-Symbolic, but they were inconsistent.
Oh.
Like surprisingly inconsistent. So even just small changes, like changing a name from Alice to Bob could like really mess them up.
So they could get the Alice problem right, but then the Bob problem they would get wrong,
Yeah. Yeah.
even though it's the same math.
Same math. And there's this one example in the paper. It's called the kiwi problem.
Yeah.
And it's this problem where like someone is picking kiwis
Okay.
and they added this detail about how some of the kiwis were smaller than average.
Okay, but that doesn't matter for the math problem.
Exactly. It doesn't matter.
So did they figure that out,
No.
the LLMs?
It totally threw them off. Like
Okay.
it messed them up and they got the wrong answers.
So they're not really understanding, they're just like keywords?
It seems like
Picking up on that.
it seems like they're much better at this pattern matching
Yeah.
than they are at actual like deep understanding, deep reasoning.
Well, that's kind of scary when you think about some of the applications of this.
It's true, yeah. It makes you think about like what does it even mean to think?
Yeah.
You know?
Like, this isn't just about AI anymore. It's about, like, what is intelligence?
Yeah.
This is already baking my noodle, and we're just getting started. But before we go too far down that road, let's talk about how this has been received. Because people have had some really interesting reactions to it. So people online had some pretty strong reactions to this research.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see like this has really seemed to hit a nerve,
Yeah.
especially on Reddit.
Oh, okay.
There's this one thread in the OpenAI subreddit where people are like making these really interesting connections to cognitive biases that like we have as humans.
Yeah, like the mental shortcuts that our brains make that sometimes lead us to, like, irrational decisions, irrational beliefs.
Totally. Like confirmation bias, right?
Yes.
Where we tend to look for information that like already confirms what we think.
Even if it's not true.
Exactly.
Like, that's a big one.
And one commenter said it really well. They were like, it's almost like LLMs and humans, we both have this tendency to rely on these familiar patterns, right?
Yeah.
Even when they don't apply.
Totally. It's like
Yeah.
our brains just want to find the easy way out.
It's so true. And like, especially now with so much information, it's like,
Oh my gosh, yes.
it's overload.
Yeah, overload. We just want those patterns, even if they're wrong.
And that's what's so cool about this, like, connection to LLMs.
Right.
It's like, are they mirroring us in a way? Like,
It's trippy. It really makes you think about, like, what does it even mean to be intelligent?
I know. Are we just like more complex pattern matchers?
Maybe.
That's what some people on Reddit were saying.
Yeah.
Like maybe we could learn a lot about ourselves
Yeah.
by studying these like what seem like kind of simple errors.
Right, because we make those errors too.
Yeah.
It's like we're holding up a mirror to ourselves and being like, "Oh, that's how we think."
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, so now I'm really wondering, like, if they're doing this, doesn't that mean they can never be truly intelligent? Like, are we just chasing after something that's not even possible?
Good question.
Yeah. But before we go there, I remember in the Apple research, there was also something about how the LLMs did with, like, harder problems. What
Well,
was that about?
so they didn't just stop at like changing the problems around.
Yeah.
They wanted to see how LLMs handled information that was just irrelevant. They called it a no-op statement.
No op. What is that?
So like, when you're reading a math problem and you
Yeah.
can tell right away, oh, that doesn't matter for the answer.
Okay.
It's like that.
Okay.
So like, let's say you're trying to figure out how much somebody spent at the grocery store, right?
Right.
A no-op statement would be like, the store had a 10% discount on produce, but the customer didn't buy any produce.
Okay.
So it's true, but it doesn't matter.
Right. It doesn't change the math problem.
Exactly.
It's like extra information.
It's just noise.
Okay. Did it mess them up?
Yeah. Like even subtle ones, like they would see a big dip in performance.
Oh. But like humans, we would know to ignore that.
Exactly. It's like we can filter that out. And that seems to be a really key difference.
Yeah.
Like they're really good at processing tons of data and seeing these patterns, but they struggle to be like, what's actually important here?
What matters? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it seems like this is pointing to some really big differences in how LLMs think versus how our human brains work.
Absolutely. But here's the thing.
Yeah.
What if those differences, those like quirks,
Right.
what if they're not actually bad?
What if they're just different?
Yeah. Like think about it.
Okay.
Humans, we approach problems with like all our baggage,
Right.
all our biases, our experiences.
Yeah.
But LLMs,
Yeah.
they're coming at it from like left field.
Okay.
They're looking at these massive data sets. Like they're making these connections we would never even think to look for because our brains just don't work that way.
So instead of thinking about them as like worse than us, we should be thinking about them as like just a totally different way of thinking.
Yes, exactly.
So are we saying, like, instead of trying to make them think more like us,
Yeah.
we should be like, no, 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 think differently. Keep thinking differently.
Exactly. There's that saying, it's like if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Right.
And I think we've been so focused on making AI more human, we've kind of missed, like, what's cool about a different kind of intelligence.
It's like we're trying to put like a square peg in a round hole. And
Right.
it's like, no, the square peg is cool. It does its own thing.
Exactly. And think about, like, if we could use both.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Imagine, like, human intuition and creativity, like big picture thinking.
Yeah.
And then you have LLMs with this crazy processing power. They can see all these patterns.
Oh, man. That would be amazing. Like in science. Like imagine if you're a scientist and you had an LLM and you're working together to like analyze all this data to find like cures for diseases or figure out climate change.
Exactly. Or even like creative stuff. Like imagine a musician working with an LLM to write a symphony.
Oh, wow.
Or an architect, like designing buildings. It's like the possibilities, they're huge.
This is so cool. So we started off asking, are LLMs even good at math? And now we're talking about like changing the world, LLMs and humans working together.
I know. That's what I love about like
Yeah.
really digging into this stuff.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
It challenges what we think. Yeah.
Sure. So big picture, what's like the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think this research shows we're really just getting started with AI.
Yeah.
Like we don't even know what it can do yet. So instead of being like, oh, it needs to be like us, maybe we need to be like, what can it teach us?
What can we learn from it?
Yeah. What if the really cool stuff is like where we don't even know what's going to happen? Like where human intelligence and this artificial intelligence, they kind of like, I don't know, come together and do something totally new.
That is a great note to end on. A huge thank you to our expert for taking the time to talk with us today.
Of course. My pleasure.
And to you, our listeners, thanks for diving deep with us. See you next time.